Yeah, Stephanie, and apparently, according to our reporting, and at least one Republican congressman, there were some spy balloons that flew off the coast of Texas and Florida during the Trump administration. And if so, it begs the question, why are we just learning about that now?
Well, I'm just learning about that also. So I never heard that out with my time in the White House. But I do want to echo David's, his thoughts. I think that we did it the right way. However, we should have gotten in front of it. I think that President Biden should have gotten in front of it and told the American people exactly why we were not going to shoot it down until it reached the ocean. But I do think overall, we did it the right way as a country. You don't want to harm any citizens. You don't want to harm any structures. It's my understanding that we had some technology that was blocking them from getting a lot of the intel that they were maybe trying to get. And again, as David said, once it was over the ocean, there was a team there. The coordination, I know for a fact, had to be huge, but there was a team there to shoot it down and ready to grab it. And we will now be able to get a lot more intel than we would have had it crash landed on land.
Right. I mean, and who knows into what? I mean, you just don't know if you shoot it down or, I mean, it hits
and that
a
would have
shopping
been
mall or,
Biden's fault.
yeah.
Yes, and that would have been Biden's fault had it, hit a car, had it hit. And again, I'm no fan of Biden here, but you have to think in this kind of a situation when national security is involved, I really wish people would stop being so partisan and just understand that there are things that the American public doesn't know with regard to national security.
And parking the balloon to the side for a moment, if we can. David, let me ask you about this. A new ABC poll shows little enthusiasm for Biden or Trump in 2024. Who else is out there on the Democratic side? Or do you think this is just the usual thing that Joe Biden deals with from time to time? He's had to overcome this in the past, but he's known among Democrats as the guy who can beat Donald Trump. What do you think?
I think it's extraordinary. I don't think we've seen something unfold exactly like this. Joe Biden has had a number of accomplishments now, but yet he's still mired in the low 40s in terms of his approval rating. And this new poll shows more than half the country would be disappointed to have him as elected as president, and more than half the country would be reluctant to see Donald Trump elected president. And there are a lot of people on both sides who have not come out. I think Joe Biden. I think that a lot of Democrats are going to be reluctant to challenge Joe Biden if he does run, and that we expect he will. But I think there are going to be tons of people who are going to go after Trump.
Stephanie, on that point, I know you've been pretty sharply critical of your former boss, but in this ABC poll, Washington Post poll, it shows that Trump would beat Joe Biden in a head-to-head hypothetical rematch. I mean, after inciting an insurrection, lying about the 2020 election, trying to overturn those election results, how mind-boggling is it for you to see Trump in that kind of a position? And could somebody like a Ron DeSantis knock him off, or do you think that that's not likely?
Well, it's not mind-boggling. Nobody should ever count Donald Trump out, period. End of story. Biden, I think, actually both men, I wish they would both step aside. I wish they would listen to the people of this country and both step aside and say, this is what I did for the American people. I'm very proud of it. But now let's let a new generation in with some new ideas. So I'm hoping Biden will maybe listen to the people. Trump will not. And then to answer your question about people who will challenge him, yeah, I do think Ron DeSantis would knock him out. Nikki Haley, I know, is about to announce. Pompeo, I'm not sure that they could knock him out. I don't think that the base would go for them, but I think a Ron DeSantis could definitely beat Trump, and then I think he could go on to beat Biden for sure. Which, not that I'm trying to give advice to the Democrats, but they should be thinking that way too. I don't think Biden is your candidate. You need to have, somebody who's younger and who can, be a little bit more forthcoming about what's going on in the country.
All right, Stephanie Grisham, David Gergen, thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank
you,
you.
Jim.